Hello out there and welcome to another session of Mita's Deep Dive Express modules. My name is Caleb Tice and I am going to be your host today. The Mita Deep Dive Express modules are being brought to you by our gracious sponsor, 420 Collections. There are two brands that fall underneath their umbrella. The first one is 420 Medibles. They are some deliciously potent edibles that are available at dispensaries throughout the great state of Arizona. And they also have their 420 skincare line, which it produces CBD infused topicals, and those are available nationally. So we are very appreciative of 420 Collections allowing us to be able to put on these sessions. And we got another great topic that we're going to go ahead and talk about today, which is very important to the cannabis industry, which is wholesale activity. So the logistics, the compliance, and then we're going to touch briefly on some of the regulatory filings with both the IRS and the Arizona Department of Revenue, just some things to kind of bring into your forefront. So we have an amazing panelist here with us today, Ms. Jen Doe from Apex Training. You want to go ahead and introduce yourself, Jen? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Jen Doe. I am the Director of Customer Success at Apex Trading, which is our cannabis THC specific platform. We also have a sister company called Bushel 44, where we offer the same value, but just for our hemp operators.
Nice. Awesome. So we'll talk in a little bit about that, about the differences in those two markets as well, because a lot of things run parallel, but there certainly are some differences there. So, all right, without further ado, we're going to go ahead and dive in. Looking forward to the chat today. So inventory is the lifeblood of the cannabis industry. Without inventory, you don't have products to sell, you don't have customers, you don't have a business. But there's a lot of things that are involved with when you throw out that word of inventory management. So what does that entail, Jen? What does that term, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, so inventory management, specifically in our industry, is really difficult, right? It's not, most of the time what you're looking at is it's a little bit more straightforward when you have packaged consumer goods, but then when it comes to flower and extraction and all those other different product types, things get a little bit hairier, right? When it comes to inventory management, I mean, you have to really take into consideration around batches and how they're testing, and each batch is different. So you might have the same strain, same product, but each harvest, each batch is really different. And so in order for you to really be able to sell your product efficiently, I think you really need to have a good system in place for inventory that takes into account all those different variances and nuances in this industry.
Definitely. So to help to provide that knowledge for the operator, because they're without having some type of management plan together, how are they going to know what they have, what's selling well, how much they're producing of it, what they can spend, like how much they're spending on it, and how much they can ultimately sell it for? I mean, there's so many of those different questions. So what are a few of the other key objectives related to inventory management? So like what's the main goal?
I would say the main goal is to efficiently, have your inventory in some sort of management process, right? I know oftentimes people are using spreadsheets, that's the most popular for this industry and it works. But in terms of efficiency, when you're looking at the amount of people that are working in that inventory, right? There's changes being made constantly. Products may ship out, but then they may get rejected. And then you still need to track all of that, right? And then there is a huge difference between your sellable wholesale inventory that you want out the door. And then if you're a vertically integrated business, you might want a portion of your inventory in-house, where you're doing like internal distribution amongst your own dispensaries, right? So that being said, there's just so many different types of inventory that you might have to allocate. You might have to allocate some of it to your distributor or your retailers or indoor, like internal distribution. So with that, all that being said, just to use one spreadsheet, especially if you have multiple sales reps, multiple people doing inventory management, it can get pretty messy. because there's a lot of moving parts.
Yep. And then anytime you're dealing with manual entry on spreadsheets and multiple people, there's always that possibility of somebody putting something in the wrong column, adjusting a formula here or there. And then ultimately all the time that you may have saved is spent trying to figure out where it is that you made that mistake.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. And if you have a large operation and you've got tons of products sitting in those, bumblebee bins, right? Like you want to make sure everything is tagged and accounted for so that you know exactly when it comes to fulfillment that you're able to not only pull the things that you need right then and there and have it be accurate so that you're efficient, but also too for your sales team. I mean, I think one of the biggest things that we've heard from dispensary purchasers is that they're working with hundreds of different brands, hundreds of different operators, right, that they're purchasing, or wholesalers that they're purchasing from. And it's normally the ones that the sellers that make their lives the easiest will be the ones that they will continue to order from, right? So the consistency of your inventory, the accuracy of your inventory, not overselling and then having to go back and call your dispensary purchaser and let them know that you don't in fact have what they ordered. I mean, that's already starting the relationship on the wrong foot. So I think all of that really does come into play in terms of driving efficiency, but also building those relationships with your purchasers.
Definitely. I think back, you just reminded me of a few vendors. I'm not going to name any names, but when operating up here in Oregon, to where they were consistently 2-3 hours late, the amounts were never exactly the same. Strains were maybe 4 out of the 5, but then there's one extra. It was a pain. And all of our planning basically went out the window for what we had tried to do for the rest of that day, but also
Right.
of what we had planned for our inventory based on the needs of our patients. So it's not even
Yeah.
necessarily that far. It's thinking of, yeah, I think you hit it nail on the head of whatever you can do to make the buyer's life easier. They're going to be more likely to want to work with you. And ultimately that comes from having a solid inventory management system so you are reliable.
Exactly. You got it.
Definitely. So, what are some of the things you've touched on? A couple of them about just the number of brands, the different product types. What are some of those aspects that are unique to cannabis logistics in the industry, and what are some things that operators or that you've seen that they've done to kind of overcome those unique challenges?
Yeah, I think there's a lot, right? I mean, really, when you think about all the nuances, like you said, that are truly unique to our industry, um, it, you really have to be dialed in, right? Like in terms of like logistics, you got to know when they're going out. If you're collecting pre-orders on an order, uh, how much of that inventory is actually sitting on a pre-order that will be fulfilled in the future versus what's available today, right? And so I think being able to have all of that data in one place, and where it's also able to update in real time, because if you think about it, the majority of salespeople, especially if you're out there, building up your brand, right? You're on the road, you're dropping off samples, you're collecting orders. I mean, there is just so much going on that, let's say you were to get an order, you'd have to pull aside, make sure you update that spreadsheet, right? Call the warehouse or send them an email, let them know that's happening. You've got to create an invoice, send that out to your buyer. And I think there's just so many parts to the logistics side of things when it comes to fulfilling an order. Because a lot of times we focus on how do we get those orders? How do we get those sales? But then what about afterwards, right? How can we really streamline everything in terms of, for whoever it is that's on the road, making those sales, walking into a dispensary, and doing those things in person, as well as the person who's sitting behind the scenes, maybe getting a text message for orders and they're updating it, right? We want to make sure, logistically speaking, that you understand your buyers, if they're on net terms, how they're paying, if they're not approved for terms and they're cash on delivery, who's going to deliver it. And then also to make sure that someone's there to accept the product at the dispensary, right? So because of all these things, there's just so much that comes into fulfilling orders and logistics that you really want to make sure you're streamlining your entire operation.
Definitely. That kind of leads me into sort of what things looked like when your company Apex Trading was launching their services. I mean, that we've seen both the technology and the tools have just come leaps and bounds from I was in the spreadsheet days. This was 2011, 2012, 2013. And I didn't have options. So I got really good at building formulas, and it took a lot of time. So tell us a little bit about kind of what you were seeing in that environment, which ultimately led to Apex launching.
Yeah, absolutely. So a little backstory, myself and all the founders of Apex previously worked at another wholesale software company. And what we found is there's a lot of different things, right? People were typically using spreadsheets, sending that out to their buyers via email or text or whatever. By the time the buyer gets that menu, right, even if it's a PDF menu, if you think about it, those items may already be sold out, right? And then the buyer gets frustrated because everything that they want is sold out and they don't want that, right? So I think there's that sort of, difficulty in being able to make sure that you have the inventory in real time. But the other part of it too is just, what we found are spreadsheets. That's a lot to handle, with every batch, with every harvest, making sure that someone's in there updating it. That's really difficult. So what we wanted to do is that last company, we created an open marketplace, right? That was gated to licensed businesses only. And, we were dubbed like the Amazon of cannabis. But what we really found there is that you can't just do blanket pricing specifically for, like I said, extracts and flour, right? Because ultimately there's a lot, and edibles too, but I find that the pain point is usually if you have a cultivation or you're processing, because depending on the potency, how it looks like, how that harvest came out, all of that, and even just the relationship you have, right? And where those buyers are in proximity to where you are. You might charge them more because they're on the other side of the state. If you're a small business and you don't have a ton of drivers that can go and just deliver product whenever, right? Like, you got to make sure the entire order fulfillment process really needs to be dialed in, and that pricing should be customized to the buyer that you have based on your relationship with them, and so what we wanted to make sure that we do is give people the ability to negotiate and to really own the relationship with their buyers, around pricing, payment options, all of that. And so that being said, the three founders of Apex decided to start Apex Trading, and we decided that we needed to pivot, right? That there needed to be a different alternative to the open marketplace. I think the open marketplace is a great option for, generating leads, collecting orders, and working with buyers you may never have worked with. However, if you want to engage with those buyers again, if you want them to place orders again, what options do you have, right? To really take care and nourish that relationship and really build that relationship with the buyer, because there are ebbs and flows in this industry, and we all know that, right? And depending on where your buyers are located, how large their volume of purchases with you look like, all of that should be taken into account when you share your menu with somebody.
Definitely. So, and something to think about too is with those kind of traditional group of vendors that you work with at a store, it's also about like trying to build that relationship with a new client. That if it's just an open marketplace, it could be that, well, this one's $10 less than you, so I'm just going to go this direction. It doesn't seem like there's that same level of trust, and that you are building that trust and providing that platform to be able to strengthen that relationship between buyers and sellers and keep that going. Because that's from my experience and when I was operating, is that it took a lot for a new brand to come in on my shelf of both, not only from the product standpoint, but really from who are the people behind this? Is this the type of company that I want to work with? Are they going to be consistent and reliable when I need it? Are they going to address issues in an appropriate way? Or is it just going to be caveat emptor? So just some things to think about on that. So that leads me into let's say let's put ourselves in the shoes of an operator who's getting started. Of what kind of questions should they be asking themselves while they're kind of developing their own internal system? And I guess kind of tied into that is there's like a brief talk about kind of internal versus external and how Apex fits in there.
Yeah, I would say if you're thinking about building your, inventory management system, there's a lot of different things that come into question, right? Like how do you separate or classify your inventory? If you're working with, different buyer types, right? So you got your retailers, but you might also have your wholesalers and you have your distributors or an outsourced sales team. And based upon how all of those relationships look, you may want to hide certain products, right, and not offer products to everybody, or pricing structures may be different. And so I think understanding like how to really separate and classify the buyer types that you will be working with or plan to work with, and then building off of that based on those relationships, building, making sure that you're able to control and own the purchasing experience for your buyers, right, where they're able to see just your products, right? If you're a wholesaler and you want to sell to a distribution company, you might be selling it at a different price than you would be if you were selling it directly to the retailer, and really being able to understand that. I would say also too, like who's responsible for the inventory, the checkpoint, the reconciliation, and then control of the inventory, and who you're going to be allocating it to. So, we kind of talked about that a little bit when we touched on it, but you want to be able to know what types of products your buyers are purchasing, right? And the performance of your buyers in terms of their appetite on a monthly basis. And I think all of that comes back to understanding your buyers and being able to allocate and make sure that you have products for your top buyers.
Definitely. And also doing an evaluation on pricing and their ability to negotiate and how strong those relationships are. Because that's, you've touched on it a couple of times. That is a huge, that is business. Business is relationships, and the strength of the relationships is always going to determine of how that business interaction is going to go. So I come back to what you said at the very beginning, make that seller's life or make that buyer's life as easy as possible for them. And you'll be amazed about how many friends and how many accounts that you're going to pick up.
Yep, exactly. That's all it is. They just want you to be reliable and show up with the product when you say you're going to show up with the product, and have the same consistency that they would want, right? So my thought is, most operators in the space would probably rather be in the lab, or they would rather be in the grow, and not sitting there and auditing their spreadsheets for hours at a time every week. When you have a system in place to help you really streamline all of that, it gives you your time back, so you can go back and do the grow and do what you really enjoy rather than sitting here and crunching numbers in a spreadsheet.
Which tell us about the resources at Apex Trading. So this is on for an operator that's setting up their inventory management and their logistics. So kind of walk us through for what you do for those operators, and what how you can help to expose them to additional relationships that they may not have access to.
Absolutely. That's a loaded question because we have a lot of different features, right? And what we really wanted to build was a very agile platform that can work across all different markets and take into account all the nuances of each market. But essentially what we do is we, support people in being able to manage their inventory and track their batches. They could even see that if they're offering samples, right? If those samples are actually going to result in future orders or not. And if not, it gives them the opportunity to find out why, right? So I think that's important from an inventory standpoint, being able to hide certain items or control which type of buyers can see those items. That's really important, but after that, we also make sure that on our platform, you have a CRM, right? So you're able to add all your buyers in. Now, what makes our system a little bit unique than anything else out there, there may be some overlap with other platforms, but what we do is for every buyer, for every dispensary you add into your CRM here on Apex, we actually generate a private custom menu link for that buyer specifically.
Okay.
So what that means is you can go ahead and you can create pricing tiers, right? And assign those to each of your buyers. The cool part about it is you can, assign a discount specifically just to that buyer. So what every single time that dispensary clicks into your menu and they see your menu, it's branded with your information, your logo, your colors, the whole nine, and just your products. They can place items into a cart and check out. So what that does is we understand that retailers are busy. They're running a dispensary, they've got tons of employees. I mean, there's so much going on. The easier you can make it for them, the better. So that's where it's different with our platform, is that buyers don't have to create an order to place orders with their seller. As long as they have that private custom menu link to order from, they just add items into a cart and check out. Once somebody checks out, right? So whether an order is being created by the buyer, which we have marketing tools that can help and support our sellers in sending out mass emails, targeted marketing campaigns to really drive those buyers into their unique menu link to place orders. But once the orders are placed, our system will automatically generate an invoice. It also automatically will update the inventory in real time. And it attaches any of the COAs or any test documentation that you would want attached for all of your orders. So you can
awesome.
it's a little bit of everything, right? So basically you put your inventory in, you put your buyers in, they get orders, and everything else is done for you. Like I said, your inventory is updated, the invoice for accounting is created automatically, which also attaches all of the test docs, and you can have that sent out to your buyer immediately. So it just really gives them a very, very clean, concise, efficient ordering process with you that they can come to rely on. Now, of course, all of that information is then funneled into really, really powerful reporting that we have, like our buyer performance report, our product performance report, that gives our operators and sellers on the platform actionable data that they can really use and go back to their sales team and say, hey, let's get these people ordering even more.
Yep. Looking at percentages week over week,
Yep.
what types of products that they order. Here's the standard number. These are just things I'm thinking of this is what I would want to know with each one. And then looking at with your staff of, well, here's a dip, here's a trend. Let's look at what's going on. Are the buying patterns there shifting? Because maybe they went to where they were buying hundreds of a particular product and then it just falls off the map. Why?
Right.
There's always going to be a reason behind it. So it gives you, I can't, I mean, I'm an analyst background, so of course I'm going to love data, but it allows you as an operator to be better informed. So you can feel more confident about your decisions, make them, and move on to the next one.
Exactly. And really, like I said, the only thing that you have to do is add your inventory and your buyers and use our sales and marketing tools, and the rest sort of just takes care of itself. But again, I think it is important to make sure your inventory and your buyers are in there, and that you have, whether it's our platform or any platform, as long as you have a system in place to easily identify your buyers and the last time they placed orders with you and their projected appetite, right, for product on a monthly, weekly, whatever basis, that will help really all of our sellers and operators really be able to guide them in making decisions, to move their needle forward for their company.
Yeah, it's almost like it sounds like you have SMART goals built in to the system. So that's
and and so much more, right? So like I won't really go into it, but basically I think the really neat part of it is that we also have a deal flow feature that's built in. So from the fulfillment standpoint, from the moment an order is placed till the moment the order is delivered and you've received your payment, there's going to be a lot of steps that you have to take in between. And a lot of that is tied to compliance and regulations, right? So as an operator, personally, I would find it really important to make sure that anyone who is touching any of my products in the wholesale process, specifically in fulfillment, that they're following all the steps necessary to stay compliant.
And that gives the ability to track that. And then there's another metric of how long does it take from order placement to fulfillment? Can we bring that down? Does that fit within the customer's needs? I mean, see, it's
right.
The data just keeps giving you more questions and more things to be able to look into. And you can just keep drilling down when you have the information there readily available for you.
You got it.
So, okay. So I wanted to touch briefly on just a few things when it comes from a few other regulatory standpoints, just some things I want to make sure operators are aware of from the wholesale logistics and wholesale compliant management. Do some additional research on these qualifications. So I'm going to put that out there that this is just to inform you that these exist. First and foremost is the Irs Form 8300. So in a cash heavy business like cannabis, there's a lot of transactions that are over $10,000 in cash. If that is the case, the seller, the person receiving the cash is required to notify the IRS through the filing of a Form 8300 that this transaction has occurred, which was over $10,000 in cash. So it's a way, and it's part of what the IRS has done to just, it's part of the FinCEN requirements of tracking funds and cash and put in place to help prevent money laundering. So that's kind of the short and sweet of it. Know that that is a requirement when you're dealing in cash. Talk to your CPA and your professionals about those expectations. It is a very easy process that has some very heavy penalties if you don't do it, upwards of $25,000 an instance. So I can't stress that enough. Do them. And if anybody ever gives you some hesitancy about it, that should probably tell you a little bit about that operator. Okay, so next one is a state-specific form. This is, it's called a reseller's form. So in order to be in business, you're going to want to get a transaction privilege tax license. Once you have that, for any of your vendors, you would fill out what's called a Form 5000A, which is a reseller's certificate. What that does is it helps to ensure that you don't have to pay sales tax on wholesale transactions because the tax is ultimately paid at the retail level. So it's a very straightforward process. The forms are available online. The purchaser is the one who's provided to give that to the seller, and just know that that is a requirement. Again, go to the Arizona Department of Revenue and talk with your CPAs and your financial advisors about that requirement. But yeah, to help you to save that 10% sales tax when you're dealing with wholesale. And then the last piece, which I'm not going to really touch on anything about the specifics, is that in Arizona, there are sales taxes. And there's also a cannabis excise tax that is paid at the retail level. So the sales taxes vary based off of where you're located. That is there's a specific form for cannabis businesses to submit those tax returns. The excise tax is for adult use cannabis only. So those sales only have a 16% excise tax. So that is also a requirement that those returns are completed and all taxes are remitted from the previous month as of the 20th. So just know that there are filing requirements. There are some specific forms for cannabis businesses. Please talk to your financial advisors and your CPAs about that. Nothing will get you out of business quicker than not filing your tax forms and paying your taxes and staying current with the regulatory bodies. Got to keep them happy for sure.
Yep.
Okay, so now that we've talked about all that dry stuff, we can dive back into a few other things. So you've touched on it quite a bit here, but I think it's really important to take some time to just really focus in on the difference between an inventory management resource and a marketplace. You've kind of talked about the open marketplace and how Apex is not an open marketplace. So I think let's take a little bit of time of just really drill that home of what the differences are and why it matters.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's first talk about the traditional marketplace, right? It's usually an open marketplace that allows buyers to see blanket pricing, and in today's world, I feel like people go in, they want to find the best deals possible, and they're just looking at those numbers, and that's how they're placing orders. But I don't think that that's a true representation of how our industry does business, right? Because there are so many variances when you think about, like I said earlier, each harvest, each batch, all of that makes the pricing unique. That combined with the relationship between the buyer and the seller, right? That doesn't really fit with the one size fit all pricing. It just doesn't work. And this is why Apex Trading added in the CRM, where we give someone the unique menu that's branded to that specific brand. And that's really important to us. I think the ethos of our company is to be plant first, but also to make sure that we're providing tools for our customers to be able to build their brand, use the marketing tools and sales tools that we have in place to drive lead generation, right? Now, let's say, for example, you're using an open marketplace for lead generation. If it works, that's awesome. We also have to think about, what about after the fact? After you gain that customer, what are you going to do to make sure that they consistently purchase with you and that you are constantly top of mind for them when they're in need of products? And I think that's where a lot of the times it's missing, in terms of the open marketplace, is you have your products up there and you hope someone's going to buy it. And if they don't, maybe you lower your price or you offer a special discount, right? But there are other ways to drive business that does not tie directly to offering discounts or specials. And I think that's where our inventory management system is an all-in-one software where, yes, you're managing your inventory in there. You're managing who it's going to be able to go to, who can see your menu, and the pricing that they see is set by you, right? And that can be different for many different reasons. So I think that being said, like being able to make sure that you are fostering and strengthening the relationship with your buyers is number one. And it's very difficult to do in a blanket sort of pricing model inside of an open marketplace.
And I think it's all the more important in Arizona, given just the limited number of licenses, the limited number of operators that you're going to be working with. That is all the more reason of why those relationships are that much important, because you will have other options. It's just reputation, it's word travels fast. And your reputation in this industry is part of that relationship of what kind of an operator are you? Are you consistent? Are the products that you represent do they match when you show up? Something as simple as that. And all of these things that I'm saying are things that I have experienced and had to have those very awkward conversations of, this isn't what I ordered. This isn't what I asked for.
No. So. Definitely. Yeah, that's exactly it. Or like you get the product and it's ready to sell and you need to sell it, but you don't have the required documents, so if you're in a state that requires you to have, test documents for everything, you want to make sure you have it readily available, and so that way the dispensary, the purchaser can turn around and put the product on their shelves immediately rather than having to wait a day or two, So I think again, every market is different and the requirements are different, but you want to make sure that you have a system in place that will support you in providing all the compliant documents that you need to for your buyers, because that's a big piece of it too.
Yep. And testing being new in Arizona in 2021, that is now a requirement. So I know that anytime there is a new requirement, it can sometimes take a bit for full adoption and just changing old habits. But that's an expectation when you're doing wholesale. It's explicitly in rule that you have a copy of the test results. It's been that way up here in Oregon since the program was program's inception. And I used to have vendors still that would show up without test results, and I would tell them, there's the door. Be like, I can't buy it. Like, don't show up without test results, because otherwise you're just wasting my time.
Right. Yeah. You can't turn around and put it on your shelves. And again, it goes back to being consistent and making sure that people know your brand and that the brand awareness is there, and that, when you say you're going to show up with the product that they ordered, They want it to be as accurate as possible. And I do feel like whether it's Apex or another system, as an operator, that's going to be huge. Making sure that you get your brand awareness out there, but also that you can back it up with consistency.
Yep, yep, definitely. So let's kind of shift in. I got a couple of more questions for you before we wrap today. But one of the big ones is what are some common questions, concerns, needs? Like I'm sure you're talking with operators and you're hearing things from the what's going on out in the marketplace. Like what are some common things that you're hearing, and how do you guys address them?
Yeah, okay, good question, because there's a lot. I think the big thing that we hear often is we need buyers, right? We've got the product is here, especially as an operator, you've spent a ton of time pouring all of your energy and love into, making sure that you have quality flower products or quality edibles or extracts and cartridges, whatever it may be. You've spent a lot of time making sure that that's good, right? That being said, like you want to make sure that your brand awareness is there, and so I get a lot of people who are like, yeah, we have really good product, but like nobody knows who we are. So we can't sell it. Like they won't even talk to us. Or, they tell us just to drop off a sample and then we never hear back from them. What do we do? So those are some of the issues that we hear quite a bit, or that they're using, an invoice system through like Word document or whatever that isn't as robust as they need it to be because of the way taxes are in this industry. You've got to really make sure that your accounting is on point and that everything is in one place. Should you ever get audit, you got to make sure that's all there. So I think the big pain point that we hear is, hey, I've got the product now how do I sell it? Right? Because there's a lot of competitors out there and I know my product is really, really, really good, but how am I going to explain that to my buyers? So that's a big issue. I think now when you're looking at a larger scale, as you're, scaling a company, there's a lot of pain points around, is everyone doing what they need to do to make sure that we stay compliant? Again, in the fulfillment process, right? Like the communication between the sales team and the team over at the warehouse or the fulfillment team has got to be completely streamlined to make sure that you're delivering, when you say you're going to deliver to your buyer. So that's definitely a pain point. And then of course, just like, how do we get a menu out, right? Where if it's a PDF menu and we're sending it out, we have to design it every single time we have new strains or new products or new quantities. And with cannabis, those quantities change very quickly. And so, having something that is dynamic and in real time in terms of branding and marketing and menu sends, I think is really important and something that a lot of our operators don't have right now.
Definitely. Okay, so I wanted to ask you, we're getting close to the end of the time here on, we've covered a lot of great information for those social equity applicants. This is going to be very pertinent for both the 26 licensees that are ultimately awarded, but there's also an opportunity in ancillary services related to wholesale logistics, wholesale compliance, and inventory management, that there's plenty of other opportunities available. So I wanted to just ask you, what advice do you have for the aspiring social equity applicant out there?
Good question. Gosh, I want to say you can do this. I think that's a big thing, right? Because this industry is so different and there's so many nuances, and it's already hard enough to get into the industry, start a business. But then once you get in, now you've got this whole new thing, new world to learn about, right? Which I would say, always be learning. Pay attention to your state regulating body around what they're putting out there, like bulletins and the changes that are happening, and staying on top of that, right? So you can be ahead of the curve. Really just focus on curating your brand, making sure that people know your brand, they recognize it, and continue to work on that rather than just saying, hey, I got good product and people are going to buy it. Because today with the internet and how consumers are purchasing, it's really important for you to have a strong brand. I'd also say own the relationship with your buyer, right? There's going to be ebbs and flows. There's going to be busy months, and then there's going to be slow months when there might be a flood of product out there and prices are dipping. And you don't want to lose those relationships with your buyers, specifically when it's a buyer's market, right? So making sure that you are owning that relationship. And same token, if you're opening up a dispensary, right, and depending on your budget constraints, like you want to make sure you have good relationships with your wholesalers so that they could work with you, and make sure they help you with that. So I'd say all of that, but ultimately having a system in place. I think a lot of times, when you're starting off a new business, right, you're looking for many different solutions, and people end up piecemealing multiple solutions, and in the end it will cost them more money to subscribe to all those different ones, but they're also losing money on whether or not, if it's not efficient, right? So if it's inefficient, you're going to be losing a lot of money trying to make sure that everything is running smoothly. So I'd say have some kind of system to help you streamline your operation so that you can spend more time doing what you love and not just doing paperwork.
Focus on building the brand and building the business and taking care of your employees and all of those things. The admin work needs to get done. We just try to make it as efficient as possible. So.
Exactly. Yep.
All right. Well, thank you, Jen. I really appreciate your time today. I think we've learned a wealth of information about both the wholesale market, what Apex does, what it solves, and just left, I think, the viewers with a lot of questions they should be asking themselves. And it's a continuous evolution. Like there's always going to be something for you to foster, develop, strengthen. Even when you're just sitting there wondering, what could I do today? There might be somebody that relationship you haven't spoken with. Pick up the phone, send it out, see how they're doing, even if it's not necessarily related to orders. Relationships go a long way. And I think that's one of the big things that's my biggest takeaway from today.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for having me. It was great to be able to meet with you and be a part of this.
So, awesome. All right. So we'll go ahead and sign off until next time.
Right. Thank you.